Hello, this is Father Len McMillan, and this is our third class for our first communicants on the Eucharist and the Bible. So what I wanted to talk about now is actually in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, you have this command to keep the Sabbath. It's a Sabbath, seventh-day rest. Now, what's interesting is that this commandment happens in a couple places in the Bible, but in Genesis, the command to keep the Sabbath, when it says rest, really you should translate that enjoy. So on the seventh day, the Sabbath rest is really to enjoy our connection to God and other people. So the Genesis command is given to a community, not to an individual. So on Sunday at the Eucharist, we spend an hour to enjoy our relationship with God and other people. And the reason God gives it in the book of Genesis is to remind us what it means to be a human being. To be a human being is to be in relationship with God and other people. And one day a week, we set aside to enjoy that in worship. In the book of Exodus, God gives a different reason to keep the Sabbath, and that all revolves around freedom. So remember, in Egypt, they were all slaves. And as a slave, your only worth as a human being is as a slave as how much you can produce in work. So the command of Sabbath rest actually means rest in the sense of not working. That the Sabbath means to be free one day a week, that your worth is not tied to how you're born, either a slave or a master, not how much you can produce. Your worth comes from your relationship to God and to other people. So in Genesis, it's supposed to remind you what it means to be a human being, and rest means enjoy. But in Exodus, the rest means don't be like an Egyptian. The Egyptians mistreated other people for wealth and power. So when it says rest and not to work on the Sabbath, it means work as a slave, that my only worth comes from making money or producing for other people. And this one kid asked me a really interesting question where I think this is pretty funny. He came up to me after Mass and asked about the command to rest. And he said his father had asked him to shovel snow with him off the walk. And he says, wasn't my father really asking me to break the Sabbath, that I should be resting? Which I thought was really kind of funny. But technically, the work that it means on the Sabbath, it means working for money or position or that of a slave. Helping your father clear the step for your family, that's not servile work. That's work of a relationship, what you're doing to your family. So I said, you know, if you really want to enjoy your family and avoid work, then give up your cell phone on the Sabbath. That's taking you away from your family and relationship. Apparently, teenagers didn't like that answer. But once again, the command in Exodus for the Sabbath is to gather together for a community, and we celebrate freedom. And later in the Bible, God expands a little more. To keep the Sabbath rest, you have to gather together as a community, offer bread and wine by the priests. Now, wow, for thousands of years, that's how Jews celebrated until 2,000 years ago, the temple was destroyed. But for the last 2,000 years, Catholics have been keeping the Sabbath by, yes, offering bread and wine with their priest. And the word worship comes from, I guess, the word worthy. You worship things that make you worthy. And so the Sabbath command to rest is really about us discovering our worthiness. We worship what it means to give ourselves worth. We enjoy our relationship to other people. We are no longer slaves. We're free on the Sabbath so that we don't become like the Egyptians. And in Hebrew, the word for taste and good are the exact same word. So in the Eucharist, every Sunday, we keep the Sabbath by tasting the goodness and discovering our worthiness. And so the Sabbath is really set aside for the Eucharist, where we continue this ancient command of enjoy and rest and offer bread and wine. So parents, hopefully that made sense. Please explain this week what Sabbath rest is to your kids. Put them in your own words. And yeah, I'll see you next week.